The Silent Echoes of Betrayal. A story of love, deceit, and redemption. I've always seen myself as an ordinary guy, living a quiet life in a suburban neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else. When I think back on my childhood, I can still hear echoes of laughter, days when my biggest concerns were making it to baseball practice on time or wondering what mom cooked for dinner. From a young age, I knew Clarissa Allen, who lived just a few doors down. We officially clicked at a high school science fair, laughing over some ridiculous experiment that went wrong. Something about that moment made me feel like our paths were intertwined. Neighbors saw us as a perfect pair. I was tall and easygoing, and Meredith exuded a warm poise that immediately drew people in. Our relationship deepened in college. I studied business management, while she focused on graphic design. Eventually, we got married beside a peaceful river at sunrise. It was a small ceremony. Her parents cried with joy, and my family embraced her like she'd always belonged with us. Back then, I was sure our future was bright. But life has a way of complicating even the simplest plans. After we'd settled into married life, Meredith's younger sister, Ava Winslow, came back into the picture. She was the opposite of Meredith's calm grace, vibrant, daring, and always on the move. I had only met Ava Winslow briefly before, since she'd been away at college during most of our dating. Once she settled in our hometown, I never imagined how profoundly she would change my life. Initially, our interactions were brief and polite. She'd stop by on weekends to see Meredith, and I'd exchange small talk with her. But I started noticing Ava Winslow in ways I couldn't explain. She was unpredictable, with her fiery hair and tattoos, full of energy that somehow pulled me in. I told myself it was just fascination. She was so different from Meredith, and maybe that contrast piqued my curiosity. I never admitted it to Meredith. It felt like a silly secret that would fade. Yet, over time, the unease grew. I loved Meredith, but I found my mind drifting to Ava Winslow, her laughter, her edgy style, even the shape of her collarbone. Every time I realized I was fantasizing, I shook my head to chase the thoughts away. But they always came back. Marriage can slide into comfortable routines, and sometimes those routines leave you craving the unknown. Ava Winslow's wild streak became an enticing mystery, as though I sensed danger and excitement every time she walked into the room. What I didn't see then was how this pull would end up unraveling everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. Looking back, it began innocently, small interactions that seemed harmless. Meredith was juggling freelance graphic design jobs and art classes, so she'd sometimes ask me to pick up supplies. Occasionally, Ava Winslow tagged along, just to help. Whenever she joined me, I sensed a strange current between us. She'd smile a bit too long or laugh at jokes that weren't really funny, and I'd feel my heart pound in a way I refused to label. She wasn't blatant in her flirtation, just playful enough to light my nerves on fire. She'd tease me about my tie or compliment my taste in music, throwing in a mischievous wink. After Ava Winslow moved back for about 6 months, Meredith got busy one evening painting a mural in her studio. Ava Winslow and I ended up alone in the living room, and awkward tension gripped the air. We tried to fill the silence with chatter about work. At one point, her foot brushed against my leg, maybe by accident, maybe not. A simple touch, but I felt electricity shoot through me. My instinct screamed at me to get up and walk out, but I couldn't. Then Meredith called for us from the other room, and we snapped back to reality. Over the following weeks, I was disturbingly aware of how alive I felt around Ava Winslow. The smell of her perfume, the sound of her laughter, the way she carried herself, it all struck me more intensely than it should have. Guilt gnawed at me, so I became extra attentive to Meredith. I'd bring her flowers, tell her she was beautiful each morning, and do anything to smother the shame. Despite that, thoughts of Ava Winslow remained. I would later learn Ava Winslow was wrestling with her own desires and guilt, too, envying Meredith's secure life, yet craving the thrill whenever we locked eyes. Neither of us set out to betray Meredith, it was more like a slow erosion of boundaries. But the truth is, the more we told ourselves this was just a fleeting fascination, the more dangerously we became entangled. A whole year passed in that fraught dance. My consulting firm was growing, Meredith's freelance projects were taking off, and Ava Winslow was drifting between different jobs, never settling down. I tried to keep everything in check, but one summer evening changed it all. Meredith left town for a 3-day art seminar. Ava Winslow texted me, saying she wanted to come by and keep me company. Part of me knew it was a bad idea, but I rationalized that sharing dinner with my sister-in-law wasn't inherently wrong. She showed up in a simple sundress, carrying a bottle of red wine. The mood was charged from the moment she walked in. The wine loosened the rigid lines of propriety. We joked about our bad cooking attempts as we ate spaghetti carbonara, but beneath the jokes, tension simmered. Eventually, we settled on the couch, scanning through a romantic comedy neither of us really watched. We just kept talking softly, veering into personal memories. She admitted she felt like the black sheep of the family, jealous of the stability Meredith and I shared. That moment of vulnerability drew us closer. I reached out to console her, placing my hand on hers, and the next thing I knew, our lips met. I still remember a voice inside me shouting to stop, but her touch drowned out every warning. Our kiss intensified into something we couldn't pretend was innocent. The surge of shame I felt afterward was almost suffocating. I stammered an apology, and Ava Winslow echoed it, but neither of us moved away. We ended up crossing a line we could never uncross. When daylight flooded the room the next morning, horror gripped me. She left in silence, and I stood there, knowing I'd done something I might never undo. I told myself it was a one-time lapse. Deep down, I knew I was lying. For days, I felt suffocated by remorse. Meredith returned from her seminar, excited to share her experiences, and I forced a smile. Ava Winslow sent me a text, "I'm sorry. Let's just forget it ever happened." In my guilt, I agreed, saying I loved Meredith and we needed to keep our distance. Yet, I couldn't rid myself of Ava Winslow's presence in my mind. I avoided her at every turn, stepping out whenever she visited, claiming late nights at the office. It tore me up to see Meredith confused by my sudden reluctance to spend time with Ava Winslow. But the alternative, falling into that temptation again, terrified me even more. Meanwhile, I was told Ava Winslow was equally tormented, juggling guilt and a twisted yearning for something she knew was wrong. Meredith sensed an unspoken rift but blamed it on normal family friction. She asked me if everything was fine, and I lied with a shaking smile. Then came a family dinner organized by Meredith's parents. I couldn't dodge it without raising questions. Of course, Ava Winslow would be there. Dread filled me at the thought of being near her again. When the dinner arrived, I tried to act normal. Ava Winslow gave me a polite nod, nothing more. I thought maybe we could survive the evening undetected. But fate cornered us alone in the kitchen. We locked eyes, and before I knew it, we were kissing again, this time even more recklessly, in a house filled with family. Meredith's mother came in, and we broke apart, pretending we were just fetching wine and washing dishes. Returning to the dining room, we couldn't look Meredith in the eye. That was the moment I realized we were caught in a current too strong to escape by mere willpower. The next weeks became a blur of coded messages and stolen moments. I loathed myself for seeking Ava Winslow out. I'd make excuses to see her in my office, locking the door behind us. Every time, I told myself it would be the last. Meredith grew suspicious of all my constant excuses. I could see her analyzing my every move, her eyes following me whenever I checked my phone. She asked questions about my late nights, about why I seemed so distant around Ava Winslow. One afternoon, she decided to stop by my office with coffee and pastries, an innocent, thoughtful gesture. I didn't hear her come in. Ava Winslow and I were talking quietly inside. We must have been overheard, because the next thing I knew, Meredith was gone. She told me later she had heard enough to confirm her worst fear. That night, she didn't come home. I frantically called and texted, but there was no response. I sank into a cycle of desperation, understanding that my secret was now painfully exposed. When Meredith finally called, she told me to meet her at the lakeside where we often had picnics. I arrived looking disheveled and panicked. As soon as I reached for her, she pulled away, pure hurt in her eyes. She said words that made my blood run cold. "I know about you and Ava Winslow." I tried to deny it at first, but there was no point. She told me she'd heard us in my office, discussing our secret. Tears and fury mixed in her voice, and I felt the heavy weight of guilt press down on me. When she demanded to know how long, I could barely stand to tell her it had been going on for months. She refused to hear the details of the first night, but my admission alone devastated her. I tried to explain how I never intended any of it, that I still loved her, but she called me out for the contradiction. How could I claim to love her while sleeping with her sister? I begged for a chance to make things right, not knowing how that could even be possible. She said she needed time, maybe space forever. Then she turned and walked away. I just stood there, feeling hollow, because no apology would fix this. I stayed at the lakeside for hours, alone and paralyzed by what I'd done. In the days that followed, Meredith cut herself off from nearly everyone. She ignored my calls and texts, and apparently also ignored Ava Winslow's attempts to reach her. She moved in with her friend Zoe, confiding only in vague terms about why she was so broken. Ava Winslow, from what little I heard, was unraveling too, losing jobs, sinking into despair, and trying in vain to contact Meredith or me. I phoned Ava Winslow once, both of us choking on apologies that felt completely inadequate. Meredith started seeing a therapist named Dr. Elsner, sorting out her anger, grief, and the raw betrayal she felt from both her husband and her sister. She refused to speak to Ava Winslow until she felt strong enough. Eventually, that day came. Meredith told Ava Winslow to visit her at Zoe's place. Though I wasn't present, I later learned from Meredith how that conversation went. The two sisters confronted each other in tears and bitterness. Ava Winslow tried to explain, but Meredith told her she might never forgive her. Ava Winslow left in agony. That was the last time Meredith physically saw her. Soon after, Meredith called me to a secluded lake house owned by her aunt. I arrived terrified of what she might say. We sat at a small wooden table, the air thick with tension. She asked why I did it, why I risked everything for something so destructive. I confessed that I couldn't give her a neat answer. I'd felt restless, selfish, consumed by impulses I should have fought. She stayed calm but cold, asking what I expected now. I told her I wanted another chance, that I'd do counseling, therapy, whatever it took. I also acknowledged she had every right to walk away. She admitted part of her wanted to slam the door on me forever, but another part still hoped our love might endure. We decided on couples counseling. She warned me she might leave at any point if she couldn't move beyond the betrayal. I promised to do everything humanly possible to earn back her trust. She let me take her hand, though she offered no warmth in return. But it was a start, and I clung to that fragile hope. In the months that followed, Meredith and I met with Simone, our counselor. We navigated the jagged aftermath of my infidelity. Some days, Meredith seemed okay, other days, she was racked with jealousy or anger. I opened every part of my life to her, sharing passcodes and steering clear of any possible triggers. I also changed my phone number and blocked Ava Winslow from ever contacting me at work. As for Ava Winslow, she eventually moved out of state, leaving only a letter of apology for Meredith, which Meredith never brought herself to read. I told Meredith I would support any choice she made regarding her sister, but she seemed too hurt even to contemplate reconciling. Therapy forced us to confront the question of forgiveness. Meredith struggled with whether she could let go of her resentment without feeling like she was excusing my actions. I worried she'd never see me the same way, that suspicion would always be there, lurking in the corners. Slowly, we began to see small signs of renewal. We shared intimate talks about our fears, regrets, and hopes. We still argued, and sometimes the wound felt raw again, but at least we were communicating honestly, no more silent resentments. Eventually, Meredith moved back in. I repainted the living room her favorite color, a lavender shade, to symbolize a new beginning. The day she came home, I could see the mix of nostalgia and pain in her eyes. She teared up, but she didn't leave. We settled into a routine that was far from perfect, yet more authentic than before. Months turned into a year, then more. We continued therapy sporadically. Friends and relatives, mostly unaware of the full extent of what had happened, remarked that we seemed strangely more open with each other, like we'd shed a layer of polite distance. Of course, that openness came with scars, but it was real. As for Ava Winslow, she stayed gone. I respected Meredith's choice never to contact her. Sometimes Meredith would wonder aloud if her sister found any peace. I wished Ava Winslow well from afar but knew it was best not to chase those answers. Life went on. Meredith dove deeper into her art, channeling her pain and growth into paintings that gained recognition. My consulting firm expanded, but I delegated more tasks to a partner, realizing I valued my personal life far more than chasing success. We learned how to live with the memory of my betrayal. It wasn't something that just went away, it became part of our story, a scar that reminded us of how close we came to losing each other. On the second anniversary of the day Meredith confronted me, we went back to the lake where she'd once told me she knew everything. We stood by the water's edge, leaves turning gold around us. "We've come a long way," she said softly, her fingers laced with mine. I nodded, heart heavy with gratitude. "I'm thankful you found it in yourself to try." She sighed, a hint of lingering sadness. "It still hurts sometimes, but I think I'm learning to forgive." I squeezed her hand, tears in my eyes. "I'll spend my life making sure you never regret giving me another chance." We watched the sun reflect off the ripples on the lake, neither of us pretending everything was magically perfect. But in that moment, I felt a quiet acceptance, an understanding that our love, although painfully tested, could endure if we kept choosing each other day by day. Author's note, Ethan's perspective. I've learned betrayal can demolish even the strongest bonds. In my case, it forced me to face parts of myself I'd been running from, the craving for danger, the ability to wound someone I claimed to love. Sometimes, with hard work and honesty, trust can begin to rebuild, scarred but not destroyed. Other times, the damage is too deep, and walking away is the only way to heal. In our story, Meredith and I found a path forward. It's not a fairy tale, but it's real, and maybe that's the best we can hope for in a world where love and betrayal so often collide.